Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast. From California, I have Leslie Smith, and she is a public relations and marketing consultant, and she helps businesses, nonprofits with their marketing, and she advocates this no nonsense marketing and PR. Really happy to have her on, showcase her brand to the audience, and add value to the audience. Leslie, welcome.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Briefly introduce yourself, and we'll dive into the questions.
Sure. So I started consulting in 1994 and I've worked with about 30 different industries over the years. So I'm a generalist because the same principles apply over and over again. I primarily do public relations, but I also move up the ladder a little bit and look at people's overall marketing scheme and see how PR fits into that so we can be a little bit more deliberate in helping them meet their goals. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So, one, obviously, we're a business entrepreneurship podcast, and a lot of people, they've heard of marketing and they get a sense of public relations. And how does marketing and public relations, how are they different? How are they similar?
Perfect. Perfect question. Thank you so much. So as I mentioned, marketing goes up a little bit up the ladder. So think of marketing as the umbrella term. So a lot of people try to use advertising, public relations, and marketing as interchangeable, and they're not. So marketing is at the basis, and this is what I promote is just learning your basics and tweaking those and keeping those up to date, and you'll be on par to meet your goals. So in the marketing mix is product, price, place, and promotion. So every entrepreneur needs to be very clear what their product is first and their price and their place before they promote. And so what happens these days is people go, "Oh, I'm starting my own business. Social media is the name of the game. I'll go in on that and I'll start doing posts and reels and buying ads and whatever." And they're not getting anywhere. They're running on a treadmill. I call it the marketing mania, right? So going back to your product and being very clear about what that is. And for a lot of physicians, it's peace of mind or it's wellness, right? You're trying to keep people as well and healthy as possible. And then, and whatever that specialty is for you, however that works for you. Then the pricing, which you have to work with insurance and all that kind of stuff, but you need to be savvy. I've been in insurance where a lot of physicians didn't take my insurance. They're like, no, they make me bill 2 or 3 times. So don't do that. Then don't play that. Force that insurance company to change the way they do business, right? So you need to look at that pricing. And then if you're in elective surgeries, that kind of stuff, choose a price that's fair for you and you can't price fix, but you can find out what else is on the market and where things are. You can use AI to find that for you and be probably pretty quick. And then place, like where are you offering your stuff? Are you a high-end med spa? Then you need to be next to the Ritz-Carlton, not next to Motel 6. So it's that place, the price, the product all needs to fit together congruently and all aligned, and then move into your promotions. And so if those things are aligned, your promotions don't have to make up for as much, right? You don't have to overly explain why you have this med spa next to the Motel 6 downtown, right? It doesn't necessarily make sense. So instead, your promotion can just say, this is who we are, this is our price, this is, where we are, whatever, and it'll all be aligned. And then the promotion matches where, your pricing structure. So if you're an elite physician or physician's consultant or whatever you're doing as as your side hustle as a physician or post retirement, whatever, wherever you are, then make sure that your branding has to match that pricing scheme. So if you're elite, then your branding needs to look perfect. If you're bargain basement, you just want to help people out and pay what you can, then you can get away with a little bit less snazzy look kind of thing. So then and promotion, then divided into advertising and PR are the two biggest buckets there. And when you get to PR, especially for physicians, I think if you're still practicing medicine, PR is super important. Like most doctors don't necessarily promote themselves, right? They're in the insurance book, they're online, maybe they have a sign out front or something, but they're not doing a lot of promotion. They're at conferences and honing their skills and their craft and staying up on the latest and greatest, and other doctors refer them. But the public relations element, super important for patient care. So patient care, you have to think patient care starts when somebody calls your office. So your front office staff is so important and they can make or break your practice. And I don't know how many times I'm like, I don't want to go back to this doctor. I need to find a different primary care physician because that front office staff flat out lied to me. They told me they sent a referral to me, which why they didn't just email it or put it in the portal because it was a telehealth appointment. And they told me they mailed it. And a week later, I get it. And it's post dated 3 days from when I talked to them. That's horrific, right? So those things shouldn't happen. And if you are paying attention to your public relations and really training your staff to start patient care the minute somebody calls, and then when they come into the office, all of that is a public relations element. So that's my message for physicians today.
Yeah, interesting. Product pricing and promotion. In a lot of we have a lot of small business owners, entrepreneurs, doctor, lawyer, dentists. What mistakes are they making in their marketing?
Yes, so that's part right? Part of their product is really that customer service. Right? That's part of your product. We're gonna do this with excellent customer service. And people do this in their core values all the time. Oh, and we offer excellent customer service, but they don't think about how that plays through. And they don't think about how do I meet a customer and how am I taking care of them throughout the whole process. And for some, you need to maybe do, you maybe need to do some role playing. Like what's it like when when a patient comes into my office? And then what happens after they leave? I think my vet and my pediatrician's office were good at calling afterwards and saying, "How's little Sammy doing?" after his shot. Primary care physicians never do that. Like, why
Yeah.
not? So surgeons, their office will call. Just want to make sure, but that should be a regular occurrence. Did you have any questions after you left the office today? Those kinds of things are paramount to their success, and they don't think about those things. The They're usually the professional services, they're pretty good because of their associations. Their associations help them. This is how a medical office or a legal office should look. This is what your website should be roughly. They didn't I recently heard somebody was talking about she's getting an MBA and they have MD MBAs in her classes. I'm like, "That's smart." Right? Because how else do you learn how to run a business? And most doctors want to run their own practice when they're in med school. And so why don't they just learn that? And I don't know if med school's changed at all from when my sister went, but she got out, she had to take an accounting class. Right. So she had to understand that pricing and that kind of stuff. And she's had some eye-opening things with having to get a procedure at the dental office and saying, that's more than I charge for surgery. So those kinds of things you need to find out if you're pricing yourself correctly and making as much money as you can. I think that's fair and part of business.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of dentists who make 2, 3 times more than physicians because basically the employment model is dentists are forced to be entrepreneurs and doctors are encouraged to be W-2 and just not we didn't learn any business skills in med school, so they just that's one of the problems. But the one thing that love is talks about a lot of the listeners, they're building a personal brand, and what are the building blocks of branding for any small business?
Sure. So start with that marketing mix because your brand, I like to think, is the overlay. So if you think of those four, the product, price, place, promotion, and promotion, think of the activities and the tactics. So you're going to do some advertising, which maybe that's online or it's a billboard or it's magazine, newspaper, whatever. And then that PR, like how are you treating people throughout the year? And are you sending out press releases for late breaking discoveries you've made? Then you take your branding is if you think of those 4 components as like a cake, your branding is your frosting, okay? But your frosting has to match what's inside. So if you put chocolate frosting, then people are going to expect chocolate inside the cake, right? So you have to make sure that your branding is consistent with those things. And so once you figured out your flavor of your cake, then the frosting it's easy to decorate, right? Oh, we're this. So this frosting needs to have so many roses and maybe chocolate dipped strawberries or whatever because we're that kind of a brand. or we're the simple frosting that comes from the can with a few sprinkles, right? So that branding needs to go through everything. So when you're figuring that out, you're figuring out your brand strategy. When you're figuring out your product is, because you're figuring out your product, you're figuring out who's going to use that. Young women shouldn't be getting Botox, unless maybe for migraines or something, right?
Ah,
So that's probably an older person, slightly older, hopefully older than 30. But
mm,
I know some people who do it. I'm like, you don't do that. Anyway, you're thinking about who you're serving through all of those things. So then you're pricing, like what can they afford? What does insurance cover? What's fair price? What are my materials? What are all is my back end? And then my place, like my rent's going to be high there. I have to be able to cover that, right? And so in all of those things, you're dictating your brand, right? And then your promotion needs to add. So it's just the overlay, and it needs to go all the way through, right? You don't wanna change, "Wow, this place over here, this is like a weird chalky flavored weird frosting." It has to go all the way through. So, like, when you're in Target, what do they wear? They wear red polo shirts. The people who work at Target wear red polo shirts and khakis in all departments. It's not something different. So if you're in the toy department, somebody walks over to you in a suit at Target, you're like, wait, do they think I shoplifted or something? You think they're in trouble because that is now off brand. It's inconsistent with what I expect at Target.
mm,
Nordstrom, famous for the return policy. The return policy is the same in every single department, right?
mm,
So if I returned something in cosmetics, I expect the same courtesy as when I returned a pair of shoes that broke, right? So it has to be on brand and it's consistent all the way through. So think of those things that are all the way through for you. You can't have things different based on the price point. That's unfair. That's discriminatory, right? You can't say, "Oh, that's the shot clinic. We don't really that's not a moneymaker for us. We just do things crappy there." No, your brand is your brand all the way through no matter what you're doing.
interesting. Moving on, we talk about just making your promotional dollar stretch. And what cost-effective tactics do you recommend most often?
Sure. Thank you for that. But that's
Yeah.
that is the beauty of public relations, right? So
Yeah.
advertising I call paid persuasion. So it's very contractual. So you're buying space, you're deciding how it looks, where it looks, how often it runs, that kind of stuff. And you're paying for that. And you could pay a lot of money on advertising depending on where you're placing it. And don't just base it on price, right? That's where your brand goes off kilter. You make a decision just based on price, it may not match everything else. Then you have your PR. PR you can do a lot is just it's public relations. So, do you go to conferences and meet people who can refer you? Do you take people to lunch and tell them about what you do and find out how you can help each other? Is there something about your business that you can write a press release and invite the media to write a story about you? Can you hold a grand opening? You could do a decent little ribbon cutting or grand opening with your chamber of commerce, less than $1,000, which could be one ad in a sizable ad in a newspaper, right? And in that, you might meet 40 or 50 people who want to sign up right there for whatever your product is. So think about and you've met them, right? You start asking people how they got their business, it's almost always two ways: repeat and referral. So people are going to talk about what you do and refer you and then come back. And it is interesting, like certain like plastic surgeons or like med spa owners, people don't want to admit that they go to those places. So referrals are a little harder,
Hmm,
right? So because people don't want to.
hmm.
No, I don't do that. I don't want anyone to know. It's our secret. So they may have to go after a little more advertising or one-on-one being out there, but you can do a lot for very little money in the realm of public relations by getting to know people, asking for those referrals. And you can ask, even in those things where they want to keep it a secret, you can say, I won't mention, if you give me their name or their email, I won't mention it was you. We're just doing this promotion and you're on our list kind of thing. Yeah. That's asking for people get shy about asking for business and asking for referrals, but that's how they're going to really expand their business, is just constantly asking.
Interesting. Yeah, I really love that. The other question that came to my mind is when people think about PR or public relations, a lot of people believe, I guess, incorrectly believe that it's only in a crisis, like
Crisis.
you did something and you got to change your image. But you talk about the other aspects. Expand upon that for the audience.
Sure, proactive starts with PR. Right? Yes, and I forget that image is out there because I do so much happy PR, as one of my colleagues who does crisis talks about it. But when they and he'll bring me in to do the happy PR while he's doing some crisis intervention for the same company because they've been lack they've lacked the happy PR. They
Hmm.
haven't created that relationship with people, and it's so important because then if you think of it like a friendship, and if your friend does something bad, you still wanna believe them, right? And then you have the if they own up to it, then that's really gosh, what a good standing person, right? An upstanding person owns up to the mistake they made. Maybe they were cutting costs on their materials or something, or they knew something was bad and they didn't say it, right? So if you've already have this sterling reputation, but you made a mistake, it's much easier. The crisis is mitigated 'cause you say, "Look at they set up this foundation, they give scholarships to kids who wanna play sports and can't afford it," or all of these things are stacked up in a positive PR resume, positive community relations resume, so that their mistake is looks less. Like, you can understand they made a mistake. That was the one-off because 'cause they've done all of these other things that are good, and now they're admitting it publicly, making good on it, and they're gonna pay cost, right? So, they may have to be out of the shadows or be in the shadows for a little bit, lay low before people fully trust them again. They may have to make a pivot. It depends on what the situation was. But I wrote this book, The Laws of Promotion,
Yeah.
and the third law, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I took Newton's laws of motion, turned them into laws of promotion. That's what it's all about. And so for a small business, like a bad review on Yelp can be devastating compared to a bad review of Disneyland. Who? So what, you had a bad hot dog that day? It'd have to be really tragic to really turn people away from something that good and big and wonderful, happiest place on earth. But those Yelp reviews or those kinds of things, which I know physicians and lawyers and CPAs get them too, and it's like, I don't like Yelp. But the you can address those publicly and say, "I'm so sorry about what happened here," and you need to find out what happened. Did your office staff lose their temper at this person? And they some real nasty people out there leave some really nasty reviews. And that's my husband likes to look at reviews that were negative and look at the history of that person to see if everything they've ever said was negative. You can point that out. You can look at that too. "I'm so sorry you had this situation." Maybe you say, "Looks like this happens a lot to you." That's the common denominator. But you don't wanna be too snarky. You wanna be above and beyond and take the high road, and so sorry that came across as however they claimed it. Come back in and we'll make it right for you. So then publicly, you've said, acknowledged, "Oh, you had a bad experience. We'll make it good." So in the book goes through a scenario of 2 restaurants, and the restaurant was accusing the brewer of shorting his kegs, but he turns it into something good, right? And so that's what you wanna do. I've learned from my mistakes, and you've seen this every election cycle. Something gets turned out, and if we like the person, we let it go. We don't like the person, we're like, "Ah," you can ruin them. So being proactive with all of those good things out in the community and for their patients and all of that. And then don't do bad things. Hopefully the crisis is just a wrongful accusation and then you can countersue and make that public, right?
Yeah. Fascinating. And again, you have this book, The Laws of Promotion. If people were interested, inspired by, or even working with you, check out your book, connect with you, how can they do that?
Sure. So the book is on Amazon. It's in print and Kindle. It is 50 pages. It'll take you a half hour to read and you'll get a lot of insight. If the book's too long for you, I just launched a always ready video that's at you can log on to mccormickla.school and you can see the free webinar for 30 minutes. And it's McCormick LA is McCormickla dot school. And there's a couple other classes on there too. Or if you want to contract with me, my regular PR implementation website is mccormickla.com. McCormickla.com.
Excellent. Well,
Thank
thanks so
you.
much for coming on and I really enjoyed this conversation and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much.